Welcome back to Old School Sports and our Out of the Park Baseball 24 playthrough of the Cincinnati Reds. Thanks so much for watching, and apologies that it's been a few days since our last episode. Had to let real life get in the way of the series this weekend. Unfortunately, had a close family member who was hospitalized, had to go out of state to help them. Fortunately, they are back at home now and doing well, and I am back at home now also and ready to jump back into our series with the Cincinnati Reds. So we are about to begin the 2024 to 2025 off season. In our second year with the Reds in 2024, we went 83-79. Did sneak into the playoffs as the third wild card. We lost a 3-game series in Atlanta in the wild card round, but still was definite progress for the team this year. We improved by 6 wins from 77 to 83. And when we think about this upcoming season, ownership's got a higher standard for us now, want us to reach the playoffs again, which I think is achievable, particularly if the team is a little healthier next season than it was this past season. Unfortunately, though, ownership did not boost our budget at all. We're still at $170 million, which is the 21st highest budget in baseball. So as we get ready for the off season to begin, we are going to tweak our scouting and player development budgets down just a bit to give us a little more flexibility as we head into the beginning of the off season. I want to check in on a few of our arbitration eligible players. We've only got 2 pending free agents. Curt Casali, who's been our backup catcher the last 2 years, probably going to move on from him for somebody younger. We will miss his captain personality in the clubhouse. Fortunately, we've got another captain personality with Jarrett Kelenic, who's probably going to be getting some MVP votes in a couple of weeks. And then Zach Wheeler, who was 8-8 with a 3.31 ERA for us after we picked him up in a trade with Tampa Bay. He is a bigger free agent, somebody that we would consider bringing back. He's looking for 5 years and over $100 million. So we are going to submit a qualifying offer to him with the hopes of, if he comes back for less than $19 million for 1 year, we'll take it. I think the expectation would be, though, that he will reject that offer, head to free agency, and will hopefully get a little bit of draft pick compensation. I do feel that heading into free agency, adding another big-time starting pitcher to hopefully pair with a hopefully healthy Aaron Nola next season is our top objective. And when I look at the top 3 potential free agent starters who aren't coming off relatively serious injuries, there's Corbin Burns, who's supposedly going to be looking for over 30, Luis Severino looking for around 25, and then Zach Wheeler, who's going to be in the 22 and a half neighborhood. So because of that, I don't think that Wheeler is going to accept our qualifying offer, but if he does, it will not be the worst value for a 1-year contract with him, and hopefully be able to pair him and Nola at the top of the rotation next year. That was the plan this season, but Nola suffered a season-ending injury during spring training and has still not pitched for us after we signed him to that big 7-year contract last offseason. And as we start approaching free agency, there also are actually a few players on our team who are arbitration eligible that we may not make offers to. Catcher Garrett Stubbs is one of them. He's 31 years old, going to be making close to $2 million next year. View him as pretty much a replacement level backup catcher. He didn't play at all in the majors for us last year, and he had a negative WAR in AAA, so that's not going to be a huge loss. Ryan Mountcastle had a decent season for us at first base, hitting .294 with 12 homers and 293 at-bats. But as I look at our team for next season, I think we're going to have Elly De La Cruz, who came up last year at the age of 22, and was pretty darn productive in limited sample size, become our starting first baseman. He's 6'5", although his defensive ratings are not great for any infield position. He could play third base, but I think he'd be an excellent defensive first baseman. And Mountcastle is also due to make about over $4 million in arbitration this coming year. So I'm inclined to try to see if we can get something in a trade for him. Jake Fraley is another guy who not sure what to do with. Spent the entire year in Louisville, did not hit that well, 227 average, although he did have 27 homers. But he's going to be 30 years old early next year, and he's looking for around $2 million in arbitration next year. So may look to trade him as well. Similarly, Vladimir Gutierrez coming off of a major injury. If we can get anything for him, I'd rather do that than pay him close to $1.3 million. And then we've also got a decision to make on Hunter Greene, 25-year-old. Has had a lot of injury issues, but had a 7.64 ERA in a very small sample size of 9 games at the major league level this year. But I look at the movement on his pitches, which is well below average, and the slightly below average control. I love the fact that he throws in the triple digits, but he's a fly ball pitcher with horrible movement on his pitches, and he's already fragile here at the age of 25, although I believe he just recently signed a pretty good extension with the Reds in real life to buy out a few of his potential arbitration years, and I think even, obviously his arbitration years, and I think a couple potential free agent years. I think we may be moving on from him in this playthrough. Last but not least is Nick Lodolo, who was our ace this past year, 16-4 record, 215 strikeouts. Probably will finish second in the Cy Young voting. We're clearly going to bring him back next year. His arbitration number is close to $8 million, but some have asked in the comments what's the situation as far as getting him signed to a long-term contract extension. The situation is there's no way that I'm going to try to do it. He's looking for 10 years at about $34 million a year, so a $340-ish million contract. You can see the number over $40 million a year in just a few years from now. As good as Lodolo has been, and as much as I like him, I'm a little reticent to sign a pitcher to a 10-year, $340 million deal as the Cincinnati Reds, particularly given that he does have below-average movement. And although he did a good job avoiding the home runs a year ago, this year he did give up 25 homers in 178 and a third innings. So we are going to make an offer to hopefully bring him back for 1 year with his arbitration eligibility, but we're not going to make a big long-term offer to him at this point, but we will get a offer to him out in arbitration. And as I mentioned, Greene, Gutierrez, Stubbs, Mountcastle, Fraley. If we can get anything in trade for those players over the next few weeks as we approach arbitration, we'll certainly do that. I've got a couple offers outstanding. At this point, our assistant general manager has left, so I don't even have, given that we are on trade hard mode, I don't even have an assistant GM to opine on some of those offers I've made, so we'll find out how off the mark I am in the coming days when we hear back from those teams, and I'll certainly share the feedback with all of you. Given that we are on trade hard mode, I haven't typically ever played with an assistant GM in previous versions of OOTP once the guy I take over for, since I generally play as general manager, moves on at the end of his contract. I've never found the feedback that the assistant GMs provide to be all that useful, but I did make an offer to a very talented scout to potentially join us as assistant GM and just see if having someone with very good scouting tendencies in that role might result in a little bit better feedback. Obviously, the input that they're giving isn't necessarily something that's 100% correlated with scouting ability, but we'll see how it works. You can see that we did make this offer to Hector Trinidad to become our assistant GM. He's a highly favored tools scout, outstanding in the majors, outstanding in the minors, outstanding with amateurs, and excellent with international scouting. So if he's willing to join us as assistant GM, maybe we'll get some good feedback from him. Maybe we won't. I'm willing to give it a try. And we've got feedback on our trades. The first one was sending Vladimir Gutierrez, who I mentioned, coming off of a torn rotator cuff. Was pretty ineffective 2 seasons ago when he was last healthy and in the majors, and he didn't do much in AAA this year when he came back before he hurt himself again. And he's going to be needing about $1.25 million to avoid arbitration likely. So we can get Juan Yepez and $500,000 in cash. Yepez is not a big-time prospect in this game, has the great home run power, not the best personality in the world, obviously doesn't bring much to the table defensively, but he's making the major league minimum, does have 2 option years left, so not the worst guy to stash in AAA and save a little bit of money compared to Gutierrez. Pick up a little cash in return, and we also just have to throw in one more prospect. So I think I'm going to make that trade to get Gutierrez off of the books and get a little bit in return in terms of a prospect as well as a little bit of cash. And we'll add the minor league prospect Javian Sandridge into the deal, and we're going to go ahead and complete that trade. So we move on from the injured Gutierrez, who's almost 30 years old, get Juan Yepez and a little bit of cash back. We'll go ahead and complete that trade. That'll help us free up a little bit more cash, getting the arbitration-eligible player who is going to make a little more money off of our books. And the other trade with St. Louis was the one that we were actually more interested in getting completed. Mountcastle, who we talked about, is going to be making over $4 million in arbitration. Hunter Greene, who I think we're about to move on from. And we were going to get the 26-year-old pitcher Andre Palante in return. He's making the major league minimum. Profiles is a useful major league starter. He had a 3.18 ERA in AAA last year, but he has had some stints with the Cardinals over the past several seasons. Hasn't been great with a 1.18 ERA plus, 1.02 FIP minus, 4.57 Sierra. Overall, he does have a 9-5 record, though, with a 3.43 ERA. So particularly until this past season, although he hasn't been great, he was reasonably effective. I think he could be a nice addition. We kind of need 4th or 5th starter right now behind Nola, Lodolo, Inoa, and potentially Tyler Wells. We do have Clark Schmidt. We do have Ian Anderson. I think I'd prefer to not have either of those guys starting. But I would view Palante as an upgrade from Hunter Greene, so would love to get that trade done. The issue is right now the only guys that get it done are our starting catcher, Tyler Stevenson, who we made a big offer to in arbitration, center fielder TJ Friedel, and minor league left fielder Austin Hendrick, who I'm expecting to be perhaps our starting left or right fielder this coming season after he combined between AA and AAA to hit over 300 with 58 homers this past year. Definitely time to bring the 23-year-old up. So I don't want to include any of them, but I am going to try to add a couple more pieces to this deal to see if maybe we can get something done. I don't know that the 2 guys I added are really going to get us much. Joel Kunel, who's been in the majors in the past but spent this entire year in AAA, and then Garrett Stubbs, backup catcher, who is arbitration eligible, and we don't really want to pay him that kind of money. Not sure whether this will even be viewed as a positive by St. Louis. Would love if they come back and there's a broader list of players who can get the deal done. But I'm not feeling incredibly confident that we're going to be able to pick up Palante without adding a more potentially impactful prospect into the deal. but we'll go ahead and submit it anyways. And we got a no way on that one. And they're still looking for Hendrick and now Kelnick or Encarnacion Strand. So it turns out that we've actually headed into the wrong direction with the two players that we added. So going to have to add some type of prospect in there to potentially get them interested. And we're going to add Will Warren into the deal to see if that'll get it done. Honestly, with Hunter Greene and Will Warren, we've got two youngish 25-year-old pitchers who can start, in addition to Mountcastle for Palante, who's a year older, certainly has a better profile, is a more established major leaguer, still likely to be a fifth starter or a kind of swing man who does some starting and some relieving for us over the course of a season. But think that the decent movement on his pitches, the extreme ground ball tendencies, and the fact that he's got 4 average to slightly above average major league pitches could make him reasonably effective for us. So we'll see what the Cardinals think about this offer. And we're still a no way. So we're really not getting any closer here. We'll keep playing around with it, but we're not going to go crazy. We're very early in the off season. We don't have to make any rash decisions right now. Certainly, there is some chance that Wheeler will accept our qualifying offer, and that will fill the spot on the pitching staff that we need to have filled, or that we think we need to have filled, without even necessarily needing to hit the trade market. I don't think he's gonna accept the offer, but we won't know until we do get to free agency. And we'll make one more try now with a somewhat legitimate prospect, Jesus Controlla, who we signed as an international free agent back before the season started. Certainly looks like he could be an above-average bat, only 19 years old. He was brutal in rookie ball this year, hitting just a .144, negative 1.5 WAR. So he's got a long way to go until he's major league ready. But that is at least a very youthful prospect that maybe will have a little more value to the Reds or to the Cardinals. And we didn't get a no way immediately, so from that perspective, maybe it's a somewhat more realistic offer. I'm sure we'll hear back from the Reds shortly. And unfortunately, we're still in a no way stage with St. Louis as far as Palante, so we're going to move on. There's plenty of time in the off season. We're not going to get obsessed with trying to push for this one deal with this one player right now when it's only November 9th. And unfortunately, it doesn't really look like there's much of a market for the likes of Hunter Greene or Ryan Mountcastle or Garrett Stubbs in the trade market. So we are going to ensure that we're not making offers to those players. Obviously would love to, and Fraley fits the same bill. Obviously would love to get something in trade for these players. We'll certainly investigate it again in a few days before we get closer to that arbitration deadline. But it seems like in general the view of all of these players is pretty similar to ours, that they're roster filler and border 26-man roster certainly, and in some cases border 40-man roster type players at this point with the money that they're scheduled to make. I mean, just to show in the case of Mountcastle, shop him around, looking for prospects, regulars, basically anything that we can get for Ryan Mountcastle, who's going to be making around $4 million next year. And we've got a lot of mediocre players that are making just as much money or a lot more money in the case of that really bad Scott Kingery contract. We can pick up Rico Garcia from the A's, but he has no minor league options left after this season, and is a borderline pitcher at this point anyways for a major league team. So there is just not a lot there. I mean, I guess I can argue we make a trade for Rico Garcia. At least it's something in return. But he's just such a borderline guy. I don't even think I want to waste the 40-man roster spot on him. So not a lot of demand for these players, so I think it's the right decision by us to try moving on from them and not guarantee them major league money for next year. And we started getting some of the arbitration-eligible players signed. Rever San Martin, Tyler Wells, Alexis Diaz, Tyler Stevenson, which has the fans happy, Ian Anderson, Huascar Noah, Nick Lodolo. Looks like we've also got a assistant GM now, and we're filling some of our minor league openings. So honestly, Stevenson was the only deal that had the fans excited. It looks like a 1-point boost to fan interest, I believe. Taking a look at personnel, I think we are totally filled now. Yep, we've got everybody filled. We've got Hector Trinidad in as our assistant GM to at least hopefully give us some decent advice when we're trying to do trades. And we've got enough money available at this point. Just waiting to hear back on Clark Schmidt as well as the arbitration-eligible players. But we've got enough money left that if Zach Wheeler does, for some reason, accept the QO and opt into another year with us, we don't have to really make any significant modifications to our off-season plans to fit him under the amount of money that we've got left. And as we get into award season and approach the arbitration deadlines, we did have a silver slugger in Cincinnati, left fielder Jared Kelenic, big-time year for us, 286, 38 homers, 102 runs scored, 120 ribbies, 5.8 WAR. Excellent season from Kelenic. As I mentioned earlier, expect that he will get some MVP votes this season. Probably not going to win, but I think that both he for the Cy Young Award as well as Lodolo, he for the MVP in the case of Kelenic, as well as Lodolo for the Cy Young Award, likely to get some pretty significant attention from the voters. And we did not end up winning any of the big awards. NL Rookie of the Year, J.J. Tompkins of the Nationals, 277 average, 21 homers, 88 ribbies. American League MVP, Jordan Nwogu of the Orioles, 41 homers, 107 ribbies, 296 average. Excellent season for him. Number one pitcher in the NL, Max Fried, as we expected. Lodolo was the only other pitcher to get a first-place vote. Inoa also got some votes, so a couple of Reds finishing in the top 6 of the Cy Young Award voting is nice to see. Daniel Espino from the Guardians, Cy Young Award winner in the American League. Potential free agent Luis Severino finished 3rd. Corbin Burns, potential free agent, also got some votes. Will be interesting to see what happens with those guys and do they end up hitting free agency. AL MVP, Aaron Judge, 59 homers for a second straight year. Batting average dipped to 270, but the production of the last 3 years for Aaron Judge, 62, 59, and 59 home runs, is still quite impressive. And in the National League, Ronald Acuna Jr. wins the MVP award. Kelenic finished 4th in the voting, and looks like he was the only Reds player that got some votes. And as we get close to the arbitration deadline, put Greene on the market again. We can pick up Kyle Wright from the Braves, who is basically just a respectable major league starter at this point, certainly not the pitcher that he was in 2022, coming off a 10-11 year with a 4.49 ERA, pretty average-ish pitching profile, but he does have the stamina to start, does have ground ball tendencies and a little bit of movement on his pitches, so he probably won't give up a ton of home runs in Cincinnati. His arbitration number is going to be about $5 million, so he's not going to be cheap, but with the fact that we're probably going to also be moving on from Mountcastle, we've got the money to fit him on the team. I don't think he's a perfect option. I think we'd love to add a higher quality starting pitcher through trade or free agency, but certainly think that Wright would be an upgrade as the fourth or fifth guy in our rotation over the likes of Clark Schmidt and Ian Anderson and even potentially Tyler Wells. So we're going to at least submit that offer to the Braves and see what they have to say. And we also shopped Mountcastle, and it was the same thing. We could get Kyle Wright in return for basically both him or Hunter Greene. We're going to actually ship Mountcastle off, add in Wencer Inirio, get the trade completed for Kyle Wright. Fans not happy that Mountcastle is gone. But now we're going to try to get Kyle Wright signed before he goes to arbitration, if at all possible. And we did get Kyle Wright signed for $4.8 million, literally the day that he would have went to arbitration. So we got that trade done just in time. Hunter Greene, Garrett, Stubbs, and Jake Fraley. Unfortunately, there's just nothing interesting to pick up for those guys in trade. So we're going to see what happens with the QO to Zach Wheeler. And then we're going to find out who's actually on the free agent market. And not surprisingly, Zach Wheeler filed for free agency, did not accept our qualifying offer. So if he ends up somewhere else, hopefully there will be a little bit of draft pick compensation coming back our way. And we have made it to the beginning of free agency. Taking a look at the international free agents, center fielder Kei Kodama. He could be an interesting guy. I feel like we need a fifth outfielder, and we need someone who could play center field, and he certainly has the range to do it, certainly has some speed. Not really sure about the bat with him, but he's not looking for a ton of money, and he's durable. We're going to at least request a scouting report on him. Going to take a while to get it back. But looks like he could be an interesting player. And then Yashiya Uehara. Whoa, this is a pretty interesting player looking for $22 million a year. I wonder what he has done over the course of his career. Oh, and it looks like with the fact that there no longer are Japanese leagues, don't really have any batting stats for him. But looks like he's a pretty interesting power hitter. Wow, Taheji Suga, 32-year-old out of Japan. Another very interesting hitting prospect, over $30 million a year. Some pretty high-level talent coming over. Then relief pitcher Dae-Sung Kim. He could be very interesting. Looking for a lot of money. Going to be pretty expensive for a reliever. Probably too expensive for us. But we'll at least request a scouting report on him also, since we've got low accuracy. So a few interesting prospects. Looking at the free agents, Wheeler, as we talked about, Severino and Burns. Highlight the starting pitchers available, along with Tyler Glasnow, Anthony Rizzo, Rowdy Tellez, Tim Anderson, Heimer Candelario, Mitch Haniger, and Orlando Arcia, also potential free agents. Taking a look at what the financial situation is, we've got over $30 million to potentially spend, so we can definitely be players for one high-end player if we want to be. Now, admittedly, as we did earlier in the episode, we did cut our scouting and player development budgets back a bit, but we can be players for somebody. So it's going to be interesting decisions for us to make this offseason because we don't have a ton of huge holes on the team. Would obviously love to add another big-time starting pitcher. Could add a backup catcher, and we kind of need another arm for the bullpen. And then, as I was talking about earlier, we kind of need a fourth or fifth outfielder. So not huge holes. The most expensive potential hole that I talked about is a big-time starting pitcher. And we've got the money to at least compete. You know, you take a look at the top pitchers who are available, and if we cut it down to the starters, it's Burns, Severino, and Wheeler as we expected. And Burns' number right now is not the $30 million that he was expected to make. Now, certainly Wheeler with that 65 movement, neutral tendencies, is probably the best bet for our park. Severino, still slightly above average movement, fragile physically. And then Burns has got the stuff in the control, but only average movement, but certainly a great pitching arsenal. Coming off of a 20-win season, 270 strikeouts, it's going to be very tempting for us to try to pair him at the top of the rotation with Nola and Lodolo. We've got time to think about what we want to do, but certainly that would be one direction that we could go in. Nola, this contract has potential to get bad. We do feel like we've got very high scouting accuracy from him, and he is now finally healthy. His movement's below average at this point, and he's a fly ball pitcher throwing in the low to mid 90s. Still has a decent arsenal. Stuff above average, the control well above average. Is he going to be a 20-win pitcher again? Probably not. Do I wish that we weren't paying him $25 million this upcoming season? Yes. But at least those numbers are going to trend down because we did front load the contract. Certainly feel like he could be a really nice number 3 starter at this point, but we're paying him to be an ace. So we've got some decisions to make in this upcoming offseason. If you've got thoughts at a very high level what we should do, would love to hear them in the comment section. Taking a look just at all players in general, you can see those 2 Japanese players, Suga and Uehara, topping the list, at least in terms of their overall ratings right now. Anderson, Rosario, Tellez, Arcia, Jalen Beeks. Be a nice lefty arm, and then Burns. Adam Duvall could be an interesting guy. Not looking for a ton of money. Not a perfect center fielder with the 60 range, but do like the home run power. He was a guy that we thought about trying to bring on board last year when he was looking for more money. He could be an interesting 4th or 5th outfielder for us, give us a veteran presence. So definitely have a lot to think about for our next episode. If you've got thoughts on what we should do or not do, as I said, would love to hear those in the comments down below. Until then, thanks so much for watching, and hope you have a great day.